Hi guys, welcome to another video. So this video, as you guys have seen the thumbnail already, is about my top 10 book recommendations. But it is not just going to be me. I'm going to be joined by my best friend Pragnya. She is a friend from medical college and who is currently preparing for her USMLE, and she has also studied criminal law and forensic science, and she's that friend with whom I've spoken about books the most in my life so far. And we decided to record this conversation this time, but even otherwise, usually it is a very common conversation between the both of us. We always share about the books we've read and why we like them, and we're always recommending books to each other. And books are something that are very close to both of our hearts and an integral part of our lives. So I just thought she can recommend 5 books and I can recommend my top 5 books. And please watch the video and let me know if what are your favorite books. Comment down below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Hi everyone, welcome to another video. So I have with me my best friend Pragnya. Hi Pragnya, how are you doing?
I'm good, Meghna. How are you?
I am great as well. So are you ready with your 5 book recommendations?
I think I am.
So how I want to do this is I will talk about one book and then I want you to talk about another book, and that's how we'll do it, okay?
Sure.
So do you want to go first or should I go first?
I can go first.
Okay, tell me. If you have the physical copy, then you can show it. Otherwise, I'll just put up
a bunch of my favorite copies together. So,
okay, great.
Okay,
go.
My first recommendation is Tuesdays with Morrie. I think I've recommended this book to nearly every close friend of mine. I think I even sent a copy to a few. So the book is basically about how Mitch Albom, the author, discovers on a nightline that one of his old sociology professors has ALS, and then he decides to reconnect and he goes and meets him. Over the first meeting, they decide that they'd hang out every Tuesday, and they discuss about some pretty lovely things during those meetings, and Mitch asks if he could tape those conversations. And the book is basically a mini compilation of those conversations. It's been a decade since I picked this up, and I think people have a few misconceptions about this book, that it's self-help or that it has a very melancholic tone to it. Of course, there's impending death and there is a theme of death, but it's not a tearjerker in a very conventional sense. It does instill a sense of gratitude in you. It changes, or at least slightly, the idea of death and vulnerability. And I think sickness does to people. It discusses about some really cool things like culture and how as a generation we are so embarrassed by silence and we seek so much comfort in noise. So yeah, I think I would recommend this book.
Actually, I read this book because of you, and I think I took your copy home. And it's also a very simple book to read, and also I have personally spoken to people who said that their life changed after reading this book, or it's basically a very impactful book. And okay, so I will talk about my first recommendation. I don't have the physical copy with me, but it is a book of simple living by Ruskin Bond. So why this book is so special to me is because it is actually the first Ruskin Bond book that I have deliberately picked up, because otherwise Ruskin Bond was a part of my life only through school syllabus, because I'm sure every school, every child must have read some poem or some story by Ruskin Bond, because he's so well known and revered in like the whole of India, and he's known for his very simplistic way of writing. So this book is basically, you don't need to read it in a linear fashion. You can just pick just open any page and you can read it. It's an account of what Ruskin Bond has seen outside his window in Missouri, where he lives. So it's just a very heartwarming and comforting book, and I think this is one book which I would recommend to absolutely everybody and anybody, because when I read that book, I realized the power of simple words, because usually when you think about writers, sometimes we feel like the more complex it is, or the more style that they have, they are better writers, or that's more impactful. But I think Ruskin Bond proves that you can use the most simple language and still impact the reader a lot. And I felt like I traveled just by reading that book, and it just makes you feel amazing. And I am like so sure that it's going to put a smile on anyone's face, whoever's going to read it. So it's like 5 on 5 for me. I would definitely recommend that book to everybody, and it's a very easy read. It could be anyone's first read as well, and it's not very expensive either. So yeah, that's my first recommendation. So now, do you want to talk about your next recommendation?
Yes. So my next recommendation is Mouse by Art Spiegelman. It's a graphic novel. So for the longest time, I didn't read a lot of books on politics and was blissfully ignorant, unaware. And then I was scrolling through Goodreads once, and I bumped into this piece by Bertolt Brecht. It said that the worst kind of illiterate is a political illiterate. And that quote had a very huge impact on me. And that's how I started reading history, politics, and wars. And that's when I started reading about political systems and totalitarianism. That's when I started reading books about Holocaust. I started with The Night, and then it's very jarring when you read things about Holocaust, but like imagine the plight of people that actually went through all of that. So yeah, so this book is basically about it's about a son and a father who's gone through the Holocaust, who's experienced the Holocaust, and their problematic relationship. So yeah, I think it introduces, it's not very difficult in terms of reading like the actual Holocaust books. I think we should all read about Holocaust. It's one of the worst war crimes to ever happen, because I don't think genocide just happened at once. Like it didn't intensify and culminate into this terrible thing all at once. It started off as casual humiliation, casual marginalization. So I think, yeah, that's why when you read books on Holocaust, you tend to identify the pattern, be on the lookout that it never repeats. So yeah, and this I think you should pick up, because they don't go through Holocaust in a very conventional sense, but he says that when you go through something so difficult, that even if you survive it circles around a theme called survivor's guilt. So he says that even if you make it out of something so devastating, your survival is not very intact when you go through a trauma like that. So yeah, that's why I think.
Yeah, actually that is on my list to read. And because you mentioned Holocaust, other famous books, I've read other books, A Man's Search for Meaning, and the Diary of Anne Frank. So both of them are so great. And this one is on my list. I think it's in 2 parts, and then there are some copies which are
true
together,
but this
right?
one is the complete thing. It has 2 parts in the same book.
I think I'm going to pick that up. Okay, so since you've mentioned a graphic novel, I want to speak about a graphic novel as well. It is one of my top 5 recommendations, which is Sapiens. And Sapiens, I've read the book, like the novel, and now they are adapting it into a graphic novel series. It's a 4-part series, out of which I've read 2. I think the 3rd one is going to come out soon. I'm not sure, but the 2 parts that I've read are amazing. When I read the book, I was like blown away, because like you said, it is written by a historian. So there is history told in a very different way, and pretty much about everything, like the whole evolution of mankind from apes to like humans, and how did religion come into picture, how did money come into picture, and how did the different countries form, and about why we eat meat, like literally every existential question, or every question that you could possibly have about how life started. And I think you'll find your answer in that book. And this was such a pleasant break to my eyes, because usually you're just reading books which are just like sentences and sentences, but this was such a nice, colorful book, and it's written in a comic book sort of a fashion. And I think it has like introduction of interesting characters like John Lennon or Margaret Thatcher, and like other famous personalities who come into the picture as well. And I think it's very easy to understand, because some of the most complex things have been broken down into easily digestible manner. So I think that is something I really liked. And I think this is another book even a non-reader would really enjoy. So that's my second recommendation. So,
did you know that graphic novels did not have a category of their own in Pulitzer Awards? Like, for the longest time, they were considered subliterate and books for like kids. So Mouse
actually,
happened to be the first book that ever like won the Pulitzer in graphic. I don't think any book has again won a Pulitzer under the category of graphic novels. This happens to be the first.
Actually, this is my first graphic novel experience, Sapiens, like proper, because as a child I've never really read comics, which is one of my biggest regrets, because when someone talks about comics I'm like, I have no clue what they're talking about. But yeah, I can hopefully change that now.
And on the other hand, I only grew up reading Tinkle
comics
the longest time. Yeah,
I've read Archie's a few years ago. That's about okay. Anyway, so what is your third recommendation?
So my next recommendation is When We Cease to Understand the World. It's by a Chilean author called Benjamin Lapidour. A dear friend gifted this to me on my birthday, and he's also introduced me to a bunch of really cool authors and books. So this is a very unique book. It's essentially non-fiction, but as the book progresses, there are some elements of fiction in it. And so it's about a bunch of really cool physicists and mathematicians. It speaks about Prussian blue, the first ever synthetic pigment that was discovered, and how it changed the art scene of Europe in 18th century. And then later on, how it was mixed with sulfuric acid to create cyanide, and we all know about cyanide. So yeah, it says that, you know, when these people have spent all their life, almost all their life into discovering these things, yet at a point later it was misused or it had some destructive things attached to it. So yeah, I think you don't necessarily have to like science fiction to pick this up. Like, you pick it up and I think it does the job for you. When I initially picked it up, I thought it was a little too cerebral for me, but it left me feeling that I want to read more in this genre. So yeah, pick it up if you like science.
That's very nice. That's very interesting. And I have never heard of that book, so I think that's a great recommendation for me. But I did see a similar book, like along the similar lines, about, you know, that thin line between genius and madness in the local library, but I forgot the name of that book. Okay, so my third recommendation is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy, because was that your fourth recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just speak about why I like it, and then you can you can add in some points as well.
It would also be your recommendation, so I had another book just in case, you know, we have that as a common recommendation.
Oh, then you can choose to recommend another book.
Yeah.
Okay, so this book, I absolutely love it. I mean, it is so beautiful, and it's also adapted into an animated half-an-hour film which won the Oscars. So, yeah, which is amazing. And he's a writer from the UK, and when I went to the local library here, in the children's section, they had like pages from this book put up as big posters on the wall, and the librarian was saying that, oh, we took his permission to put this up, and I hope he comes to the library someday. So I really hope that happens, because I would love to meet him and tell him how amazing the book is. I think it's even though it looks and comes across as a children's book, I feel it's more for the adults than children. It really talks about just life and how to live, and what kind of mindset to have so that you can have a happy life. And of course, it also talks about the importance of cake, which we all love. And I remember I was feeling very anxious in the first couple of weeks in the hospital, because it's a new workplace and a new job. And I went to the hospital library, and this is the book I saw. And even though I've already read it, I picked it up, I sat in the library, and I just read it in one go. And it just made me feel so much more better and more hopeful. So I think I actually picked up all the books which are very easy to read today, because they're mainly for people who never liked reading and want to get into reading, or even for readers who are just going through a reading slump, because I think I am going through one right now. I'm not reading. It's been a while since I've read anything. So yeah, what do you like about this book?
The fact that it I take 7 minutes to complete it. Casual flex. I think anybody would take the same amount of time or like very little time. You can read it in a go. I think I relate to that part where you said you read it when you were going through an anxious phase. So yeah, like I didn't carry a lot when I was going, but this is one book that I carried with me and I read it. I reread it. I think like people should read it whenever. Like it's very easy to read and it's very pleasant.
And it's beautiful how he if whoever is not following him on Instagram, they should, because he keeps posting there as well. And I think he says that he leaves this book on the park benches for like random people to just pick it up. And that is so beautiful, because imagine just walking in a park and just finding a book that you could just take home, and then it ends up being the most beautiful book ever. So I think that's a very nice initiative that he's done and is still doing. So yeah, okay. So what's your fourth recommendation?
Yeah, so my next recommendation is The Windworm Chronicle by Murakami. I'm a little doubtful about recommending this to people who already don't read magic realism, but I wanted to recommend this because it has gotten me close to literature. This is a book that has gotten me really close to literature. And when I first picked up magic realism, I didn't even know that a genre like that existed. So I went right in, and it was a fun thing to read. And I think so. This book is basically about how a man loses his job, and then his cat goes disappearing, and he has a very weird relationship with his wife. So he decides, inspired by a war veteran, that he'd go to the bottom of a dried well. He sits there, and then he starts introspecting, retrospecting, and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a very fun read and also a little scary. So it's got multiple elements in it. So when I think people who look for logic or who think that the concept of time, who want the concept of time to be very linear and non-fluid in their books, I don't think they should pick it up. But I really like his writing style, and it's I just love a lot. I didn't read his entire body of work, but I've been seeing these like things about how his depiction of women is a little problematic, and then I was thinking how, in spite of reading a few books, I've never like recognized that like his depiction of women was problematic. But I think it's important to like recognize patterns. But I also think that we need to keep in mind the time and age that these books have been written in. So yeah, I think if you are into magic realism, I think you should pick up Murakami. And I think people seem to love Norwegian Wood and Kafka on the Shore a lot, but this is my personal favorite from amongst the ones that I've read.
Yeah, so I definitely remember you speaking about this book many times.
Yeah.
And you were the one who introduced me to Murakami and also to Mitch Albom. So I've read Norwegian Wood because of you. But I also don't remember thinking anything about the depiction of women or anything. Okay, so my fourth recommendation is a book called Anxious People by Frederick Backman. And in the recent times, he has absolutely become my favorite author. And forget about his books. If someone is on Instagram, they should go follow him on Instagram as well, because his Instagram captions are so quirky and funny and witty. And so why I love this book is, so a friend recommended this to me, and it was my first Frederick Backman's book. And I think he's more famous for A Man Called O, which was recently adapted into a movie as well. But somehow I ended up reading Anxious People first, so that's why I want to recommend that first. And although I love both of them, so Anxious People is essentially like a character study about a group of people who find themselves in a very strange situation. And by the end of the book, like when you reach the end of the book, you realize that you actually are very aware of the nuances of each of the characters, because the character development of each character in that story is so good. And I think the best thing about the book was his writing style. He actually writes in Swedish, and his work, they're all translated into English, but his Instagram captions are in English. And I always used to wonder why doesn't he write in English, because it actually feels the same to me, the writing style. And I think he has one of the quirkiest writing styles. Like I don't even know how to describe it. You should read it to know it. but he has a very, very different writing style. And again, very simple to understand. He doesn't use any complex words or anything. So yeah, I think lately I've been really appreciating authors who use very simple language but make a lot of impact. So I think everyone should read this book. And it's also a series on Netflix, but in Swedish, I think. I haven't watched it, but yeah, that's my fourth recommendation. So what's your fifth recommendation?
My last recommendation is The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. It's a short read, it's a novella. It's a classic, so I think everybody should reread it. It's one of those books that people should reread. It's about an old Cuban fisherman who lives in poverty. By poverty, I mean absolute poverty. He's down on luck, but is still very persistent. I think as a generation, we tend to give up at the slightest minor inconvenience, but I think it basically teaches you to try and try and try. Also, I think I would also recommend Hemingway's other books. I think he's a very cool writer. He's very cynical, critical, and also very acerbic. Gabriel Garcia Marquez calls him the scientist of literature. I think also people who like writing, I think, look up to him. He's got really a bunch of really cool things to say. And
I think he's a part of the syllabus for many English literature courses.
Yes. Yeah, I think he also says this. I like this one thing that he says about writers. He says that writers should have an inherent built-in bullshit detector. If you're writing bullshit, you should be able to call it bullshit, and just basically has high standards for writing in general. I know a few people seem to have a problem with his actual personality, but I understand why. But even then, I think just separate the art from the artist and pick up Hemingway.
Yeah, that's nice. I actually bought a copy of that after coming to the UK, so I'm yet to read it. And okay, so my last recommendation is also a novella. It is called The Little Prince. I don't know if you've heard about it or you've read it. So it's by this French author. I am pretty sure, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but the first name I think is Antoine, and then he has a long name. So this is a book that I reread. Again, very simple book that you can read it in one go, in one sitting. It is basically about a prince who visits various planets, including Earth, and it revolves around the themes of friendship, love, loss, and life. And it basically starts off with talking about grown-ups or adults and their inability to perceive important things in life. And it's a very interesting book. Most children's books are more apt for adults. And again, this is a very easy book to read. So any non-reader can also pick it up and read it very easily. And it's a book that will make you think about how you're looking at things in life. So I think it would definitely give you a new perspective to look at life as an adult. Considering how hard adulting is, I think it would really help you. So yeah, those are my 5 recommendations, and I know that there are many more books that both of us love and would love to recommend. So we can do more videos in the future. I think it's already a very long video. So yeah, so how do you want to say anything before we...
It was fun. I broke my head as to what I should be recommending, because there's so many that I like recommending, and generally I think we have a thing for books. So
yeah. I mean, now we are recording it, but otherwise also this has been a casual conversation between us many times, just talking about books. And I sometimes feel like we enjoy the process of talking about them more than actually reading them also, because I think when you have someone to discuss with after you read the book, that experience is much more enriching, I feel.
I think I've had the chance to discuss the books I've read with a lot of people, but I think I should do it with you more often.
Yeah, we'll do this again. So okay, so bye.
Bye-bye.